Oh, kiddo. Hey, 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 hey. Started early. So we could get everybody here. So if you're hearing on chat live, log in by telling us you're here is what I mean. So going to be going to Judges chapter 4 and Hebrews chapter 11. So good, we got two people already here. And I'm following a suggestion. Somebody said, why don't you come on earlier than 7 o'clock? And really, you think about it, we get to our buildings earlier and we arrive at the building and people come in and talk early. So I'll be here if anybody wants to come in and talk early. So if you're on the chat, tell us howdy. Well, I'm boring myself waiting on all of this. But I do see that there are two people watching. So to you two people, or two families maybe, thank you for joining us. I'm going to wait. It's not 7 o'clock yet, so we're going to wait a few minutes and then we'll start. Hmm. ESG. Well, it's me. See, I got it shared before 7 o'clock. Yes, Emily's got it shared before 7. And tonight is a night of predictions of hurricane weather in our area. So my prayer is you are all safe from the hurricane weather. All of our cookie hutch. Yay, Emily. And we have more coming in. If you're coming in, we're going to briefly look at Hebrews 11 and then go to Judges chapter 4. Hope everybody's had a good day. And did you have a good school day today? I absolutely did. Thank you for asking. I had a real good day today. God has blessed me greatly today with so many good things. Today's really been a good day, really. I'm glad you asked because I really did. I had a good school day today. Sure did. There were no children there today. That was not what I was basing that off of. Let me say that. I had one of those days where so many things turned out right. Have you ever had a day where things just turn out right? Well, today was really one of those days. Like some days things turn out wrong, but today was a day I think that so many things I tried, I accomplished, and they just turned out right. I mean, just one of those days where, hey, that worked. Yay, we got that done, and all of this. And Emily's in there making comments on the side saying, your supper was ready when you got home. And yes, it was a good supper because we had homemade Salisbury steak, homemade mashed potatoes. Uh, let's see, dried. Can't think of what kind of beans those are, but anyway, lima beans, green lima beans, and fresh pone of cornbread. It's just like because she makes it a lot like my grandma Gerganus used to make. In fact, it is the same recipe. Uh, with all respect to grandma, it's not exactly hers, but boy, is it good. And a freshly sliced cantaloupe and some freshly cut and made slaw. I mean, it was really a good meal. Yeah, I guess that's why I'm yawning and a little sleepy here. I was fed really well today. I can say that. Fed really well today. She sent me a text and said your favorite today. So yeah, yeah, I've had a good day today. Maybe that's just at a any day ended with a meal like that. How how much better could it be? Like I say, God has blessed us all so greatly. Wendy Wade is here. Hey there, Wendy. And we're in here. Now I see that it's 7 o'clock, 7:01 actually. And Drew should be coming in any moment now on his computer. We have two or three more. So since it is 7:01, let's go ahead and look at Hebrews chapter 11 and look at who we're going to study about today. So I go to Hebrews chapter 11. Oh, no. I had something else planned. Backtrack. Okay. I found the coolest riddle and I want to share it with you. And then when I share it with you, you can share it with others. Okay. So it's a what am I riddle. Okay. So the riddle is what am I? And I want to see if anybody can guess it. All right. And then we'll look at a verse that's what I'm talking about. Okay. All right. So here's the riddle. What am I? I travel nearly 100 miles per hour, yet I never leave the room. You can cover me up, but even while covered up, you cannot slow me down. You cannot decrease my speed. And I may come only once, but I may come again and again and again. In fact, I came 7 times to a child in the Bible. And there's your riddle. Let me repeat that, okay? So here it is again. What am I? This is a riddle. What am I? I travel at nearly 100 miles per hour, yet I never leave the room. You can cover me up, but even while covered up, you will not slow me down. You will not decrease my speed. And I may come once, or only once, or I may come again and again and again. And in fact, I came 7 times to a child in the Bible. So does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? If you do, if you know, if you can think of what this riddle is, talk about it at your homes. And if you know what it is, you can type it into the chat. Let's see, I might could type. That's a lot to type. So I travel at nearly, and no Googling it. Got I travel at nearly 100 miles per hour. You may cover me up, but even then you will not slow me down. I may come only once, or I may come, I'm typing this out, again and again and again. In fact, I came 7 times to a child in the Bible. Let's see. Try something else. I had to put in the Bible there because it's only let me type in 200 words. But there's the riddle. I travel at nearly 100 miles per hour. You may cover me up, but even then you will not slow me down. I may come only once, or I may come again and again and again. I came 7 times to a child in the Bible. So there is the okay. Trouble is not it, and nor is consequences, because yeah, trouble can travel at nearly 100 miles an hour, but boy, it sure isn't contained in one room all the time, is it? Ooh, it can really, it can go out of a room into many rooms, can it? So it's not trouble. Consequences can also leave the room. And somebody said, somebody said, and I'm talking about if you're in the room, of course, but there's a hint. Somebody said anything could travel. There is a way this could, but usually speaking, no, it does not travel out of the room. What am I? That's the big thing. What am I? So I got a guess for trouble. I got a guess for consequences. And I gave this to several friends yesterday. One of my friends did guess it. And I don't know if she ever watches us, but I will give Miss Norma a shout out, the receptionist at Jasper Family Services, and Wendy Wade. Congratulations to you, because yes, you got it. The answer is a sneeze. A sneeze. All right. So sneeze travels at nearly 100 miles per hour. You can cover it up, but you do not slow out. You don't decrease the speed. Uh, a sneeze can come only once. Some people sneeze one time and that's it. I'm one of those who sneeze again and again and again. If you don't believe me, you can ask Drew or Emily. And I did come 7 times to a child. And Wendy even got what we're talking about, the child in Second Kings. So I'm going to look at that. And that's in Second Kings chapter 35, where the child died and Elisha brought him back to life, where he says, and he returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. So, yes, the answer is a sneeze, and a sneeze did come to child. Way to go, Wendy. Very good. I don't have any prizes to give you, so just pat yourself on the back, all right? And give yourself that big, happy, Wendy smile that you give the rest of us, because that was very good. Okay, so now we're going to go to Hebrews chapter 11, and you can take that riddle and you can tell that to others. And really, the coming 7 times to a child is there you go, Wendy. Good smile. Coming 7 times to a child, something I added on to it. It was not on there. I thought that would be a good hint, but you can tell that with or without the coming 7 times to a child, because the other 3 parts are good too. So let's look at Hebrews chapter 11, and Where we are is in verse 32. All right, so what more shall I say, for the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak. I'm going to stop right there because we're going to talk today about Barak. Now, Barak, and when I remember reading this before I studied for this lesson. Uh, I had to make I had to make myself think of uh, Barak because he's one to often confuse with Balak and Balaam, and there's Barak because usually we don't talk about Barak. We talk about one of the other characters in that story. And that character is Deborah, and Deborah is famous for what reason? So here's another trivia question. If you didn't get the one about the sneeze, why is Deborah such a famous Bible character? Or something about her that we know her as. She is who? Deborah is the what? So turn and talk in your families. And Angie Slate, hey Angie, glad to have y'all here. And I know you means y'all because y'all are all together at that house, you and your family usually. And she was the only. We got a judge, the only woman judge, or only judge. That sounds like we're doing a multiple choice, A, B, or C, and the answer is B. She was the only woman judge, although she was a judge. She was a judge that was an only judge of something, but she was the only woman judge out of Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Abimelech, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, Samson, Eli, Samuel. And thank you to my Granny Pounds for teaching me and drilling me the judges. But Deborah was the only woman judge. And this is her story too. So we talk about Deborah, and Deborah definitely was a female military leader. We're not talking about a just a person who sat around in a black robe. She was a military leader, and she also judged between the people between a place called Deborah's Tree. So let's just read this. Let's go to Judges chapter 4 and read this in its entirety. And what an exciting chapter Judges chapter 4 is. And I want to tell you something. I remember reading through the Bible, going through Joshua, and thinking, okay, I'm waiting for more action. I'm waiting for more action. And there is quite a bit of action in Joshua, but a lot of the military action is in Judges. And right here in Judges chapter 4 is one of those chapters. So let's look at this. When Ehud was dead. Now, let me stop right there. Ehud is also known for something. And I guess you can hear my dogs howling out there. Ehud was known as a judge, but what was Ehud famous for? Ehud was famous for something too as a judge. So let's go ahead and get that trivia question done. Ehud was the what judge? Anybody remember? I'm gonna let you turn and talk about that. And if he's listening, I'm gonna give you a hint. I'm gonna give a shout out to my cousin Big Ray, my Big Ray Greganus. We called him Big Ray because Ray Rhodes was Little Ray. I hadn't used the phrase Big Ray in a long time, but to my cousin Ray Greganus, shout out to him because Ray and Ehud have something in common. And what is that? Oh, Drew Gerganus put it up here. And yes, that is correct. Ehud was the only left-handed judge that is recorded. I'm picking at Ray because he's left-handed, and Ehud was our left-handed judge, and the only one that we have specifically mentioned that we know was left-handed, and that's something very interesting that uh, he And there's a whole story of Ehud and how him being left-handed helped him. Now, I'm not going to go into that because it is in Judges chapter 3, and Judges chapter 3 and chapter 4 have a little bit of gore in them, a little goriness of this is really what war is like type thing. So let's go to Judges chapter 4, and we're going to. And Angie said, Will. So I didn't know that. Is Will left handed? Oh, yay, Will. All right. I'm right handed, but shout out to all my left handed friends because somebody said they're the most discriminated against. And really, back in the days when all of the desks used to have the little sidebar for you to prop your arm on and write, they were always right-handed, and sometimes and they did make some left-handed ones, but it was aggravating, I imagine, to no end to have to sit in a right-handed desk being left-handed. Now the desks are, they're not like that, so they can work for either hand. And I was told that my grandfather Gerganus, Papa Gerganus, was ambidextrous. And I was told, I believe by one of my aunts, that he could actually write with both hands. So quite amazing feat there. But anyway, only left-handed judge was Ehud. So I just wanted to say that and give Ehud his spot, time in the spotlight tonight as we're talking about these judges. They are fascinating to me. To me, some of these judges are more fascinating. To me, studying the judges are more fascinating than studying the kings. After you get past Solomon, and then there's a little more action down there with Ahab and Jezebel and all. And there's a lot of things that go on, a lot of drama with the kings, but there's a lot of action with the judges. And that's Ehud, the left-handed judge. So we would see this pattern now. Israel would do something. Let me just start this way. Israel will be living righteously. The judge would die. They would get evil. They would get so evil that the Lord would allow an opposing army to come in. This taught them a lesson. They would cry back out to God for help. He would deliver them up through the hand of a judge. The people would get back righteous and stay righteous as long as the judge was alive. And then he died, they'd be righteous a little while, maybe even that generation or two. Then it'd go back to the same cycle. Do evil, get punished, cry out to God, get delivered, get back righteous, do evil again. And there's this over just cycle after cycle. And it was that way with some of the kings too. They would be good as long as the king was good. It does show us the importance of good leadership, even in the church today, how important a leader is. So we're going to go to chapter 4 again. When Ehud was dead, the children of Israel did again. The children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who dwelt in Harosheth Hagoyim. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, for Jabin had 900 chariots of iron. And for 20 years he had harshly oppressed the children of Israel. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. And she would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Then she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded? Go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor. Take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Zebulun, and against you I will deploy Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude at the river Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hand. And Barak said to her, if you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. So she said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, there will be no glory for you in the journey you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kedesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kedesh. He went up with 10,000 men under his command, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber, the Kenite of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had separated himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent near the terebinth tree at Zaanim, which is beside Kedesh. And they reported to Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera gathered together all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the people who were with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, up, this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And the Lord rooted Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael. Now, let me stop right there. Sometimes I've heard her name pronounced Jael, like rhymes with Jail, or rhymes with Gail, Gail, or I've heard her name pronounced Jael. So I'm going to say Jael because that's the pronunciation I like. I like that pronunciation. I'm just going to say that. On these pronunciations, I remember a preacher was complaining about so and so didn't pronounce such and such a Greek word or Hebrew word correctly, and I studied that, and I found that we do not know the exact pronunciations of many of these words because you don't see vowels in the ancient Hebrew, and you see consonants, and sometimes the vowels would be left of the way the people said them. Now, we could probably read, I'm saying this as a reading teacher, we could probably read a ton easier if we didn't have to mess with vowels, A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y, sometimes W. Remember all that from school? Well, it's the vowels usually that mess people up because, for example, the letter M always sounds like and the vowel A can be A, all kinds of different sounds. And we put vowels in these words in the English language. So I don't know how they would have pronounced this exactly. I'm going to say Jael simply because you hear like Israel, and El means of God. Emmanuel, there's that sound as well. Michael may have been pronounced that way. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to say Jael. So let's go back to our story now at verse 17. However, Sisera, now let's just recap. Sisera's being chased here by Barak, and they go and he pursues these chariots, and they fall by the edge of the sword, and Sisera's run away. So let's go take up with what's happening with Sisera at verse 17. However, Sisera had fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me. Do not fear." And when he had turned aside with her into the tent, she covered him with a blanket. Then he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a jug of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes and inquires of you and says, 'Is there any man here?' you shall say, 'No.'" Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple. And it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. Then, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you seek." And when he went into her tent, there lay Sisera dead with the peg in his temple. So on that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, in the presence of the children of Israel. And the hand of the children of Israel grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. Now, I feel like I'm going to sneeze myself after giving that riddle. All right. If ever there was a story, and here we are on the week of Halloween where people tell scary stories, and this one a true story. If ever there was a story that fits the scariness, the scary factor, the gore factor, almost like something out of a horror movie factor, it was how this man's life ended right here. Everything is going crazy. I'm sorry, yes, it is going crazy. He's being chased, and then he finds refuge. It's like he cannot get away from the pursuers, and he thinks he's found a safe place. And it's with this kind hearted woman who tells him to come in, lays him down, covers him with a blanket, and speaks or goes opens up a jug of milk when he wants some water. I want to say something about how she did that in just a minute, because it was quite deceptive. In fact, let me just say it right now. When she opened up that jug of milk, and that's funny because we say today, opened up a jug of milk. Now, we know when we opened up a jug of milk, that means we went to the grocery store, we have a plastic jug, we pop the ring on it, yada, yada, yada. But her to open up a jug of milk would have been where they would have to have milked it and sealed it some way in all of this. We don't see it here, but we go to the next chapter and we get a bigger picture of what happened inside that tent. And it's in chapter 5. So go to Judges chapter 5 with me. And this is called the Song of Deborah. And in Deborah's song, she praises Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, in verses 24 following. And look at what she does, what she says. Deborah adds this to it in verse 25. He, that is Sisera, asked for water, she gave milk. She brought out cream in a lordly bowl. Now, that is a very interesting way of putting it. Cream in a lordly bowl, and I believe the King James there says lordly dish. In other words, she brought out the company dishes, right? The best china, and fed him milk. Now, some have said this. He asked for water and she gave him milk. Now, we today many times drink milk for I guess, sedative purpose, to go to sleep sometimes at night. I know it helps me if every time I can't go to sleep, instead of tossing and turning, to go and get a glass of milk, and it kind of calms you. And she would not have had a cold refrigerated milk, but she would have had something sealed. It seems that she opened it and brings it to him. Cream is the word that we see here with Deborah, so a thick milk in a lordly bowl. And look at this. Look at how Deborah describes this. She stretched her hand to the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sisera. She pierced his head. She split and struck through his temple. At her feet he sank. He fell. He lay still. At her feet he sank. He fell. Where he sank, there he fell dead. And I'm telling you, as I read that, I feel like I'm telling a ghost story. Like it has that rhyme, that rhythm, that meter to it. It has that horror to it. And you, out of all the things that could have she could have done, all I can say every time I think of it, every time I ever study this, all I can say is, wow, wow. Deborah promised if she went with Barak, that the glory would go to a woman. Now, let's just go back. Let's look at that. In and we're not going to leave. I want to come back to chapter 5 in just a minute. Okay. So, because it reads some of this, and I do not know where a lot of authors get their inspiration from. Some of the way Deborah's song's worded reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe's writings. And, he wrote The Raven, The Pit and the Pendulum, and some pretty horrific stuff. But I don't know where he got some of his inspiration from. I know the time that he lived, the Bible was taught a lot. He could have not got some inspiration from the Bible. I know Mark Twain did. Some of his things you can tell have that he knew the Bible from it, from what he wrote. But looking at this gory story, Ehud has died, and Israel is wicked. Now remember, let's go and do some numbers. I think it's time. Drew says I can write with both hands, just not very neatly. No, not with either one, Drew. So I have to get you there, buddy. Yeah, that's good that you can write with both hands. I did not know that. But if you think you can conquer the world, let me just say this on that about Ehud. If you think you can conquer the world, and as the saying goes today, think you're big and bad, just put down everything, pick up a pencil, and write your name with the opposite hand of what you're usually writing with. So if you're right-handed, just stop and write your name with your left hand, first and last. Try it in cursive if you write cursive, and you'll see exactly what a feat that is. In fact, just try to take notes with your other hand. It kind of is very humbling because it shows you, we're not in charge of all things. We can't even write with the other hand. But in this time period, I have a trivia question for you. How many years did Midian oppress Israel before Gideon sprung into action? Answer that. Let's do a remembrance now from the other day. How many years did Midian oppress Israel before Gideon sprung into action? And they cried out, God sent a prophet, then he sent Gideon. So let's see if we can remember this just from the other lesson. How many years did Midian oppress Israel? And I am waiting for an answer to come into this chat box on this. How many years did, and I'm going to tell you something. I can see my head position and all. And when I go to my page I read from, uh, if my head sinks down like this, I'm trying to look into. I apologize for that. I hope you're listening. Hope you're listening and not looking at me because uh, the word of God I'm preaching is a lot better than what you're looking at. I can tell you that right now. So how many y'all come on now? How many years? How many years did Midian oppress Israel? If you're at home, I hope you're turning and talking about this too. Angie, thank you. 7. Okay. So for 7 years, Midian oppressed Israel. Now let's go to this time now. Let's look at this time. How many years did Jabin oppress Israel? I'm going to have to give you a verse on that. Wait just a minute. Okay, how many years did Jabin oppress Israel? And this, we actually, and I didn't say this, and I need to. We actually went back in time. Deborah is listed before Gideon. So, how many years did Jabin oppress Israel? Okay, if you start reading the chapter, you should be running into it. They said there was a preacher. His name was Marshall Keeble, and he was, I don't know, late mid 1900s preacher, and he sometimes would say, just read the Bible for what I said, and you'll run into it. Read that chapter, and you'll run into it. So, how many years did Jabin oppress Israel? All right, thank you. 20 years. So, this was before it maybe, we can look on the bright side of this. At least it only took Gideon's generation 7 years to open up their eyes and see, hey, we need to call on God. And this is double what Gideon's generation had to endure, plus a few more. So 7, 14 plus 6, nearly 3 times as much. Not exactly, but 20 years. So we got him oppressing Israel for 20 years, and he had 900 chariots of iron. And do you realize this would have been like an army tank for that day? Now, we picture the Iron Army tanks of today and how they're impenetrable. Well, 900 Army tanks would be something, but here's the equivalent of it: 900 chariots of iron. Now, these chariots, they were not just two-wheeled carts that they rode around in. They would have, and maybe you've seen pictures of them, the front of it would be very high up, and you could rise up and shoot from that high up wall. There would be a high up wall in the front. Someone may have them in the back, kind of like a tank would. And having that made out of iron would definitely deflect arrows and spears and all kinds of things that would be shot at you from below, and even, of course, rock slings, things like that. These chariots of iron were like the equivalent of a fleet of army tanks. And who's going to go against them for 20 years now? And they're going to last long. And for 20 years, he's ruled this area. We talk about with an iron fist. He ruled it with iron chariots. And Deborah, now the scene changes in verse 4. All of this is going on. We're setting the scene. I love how the Bible does this. It's just the best scene setter. We have all of this going on in the country. Meanwhile, all by herself, her and her husband Lapidoth, we have Deborah. She's a prophetess, and she's the judge. There's the palm tree of Deborah that, of course, would have been named after her. And oh, you got to watch out when you read some of the Bible commentaries because one of them said they could have confused this with the tree of Deborah, the nurse of Rebecca, Isaac's wife. We're several hundred years from that, right? Rebecca, this nurse, it's believed that Samuel wrote Judges. And and we know the Holy Spirit guided him to do that from what Paul tells us on how these things were done. And that's just ludicrous to say. They might have confused that. It's not Deborah. It's not Deborah, the nurse of Rebecca. That was a different Deborah. And it's not that Deborah. When you're talking about Deborah the judge, common sense would tell you why that was called the palm tree of Deborah, because people went to the palm tree of Deborah to see Deborah the judge should be judged by Deborah. Now, I don't get some of these Bible commentators who are supposed to be scholars saying some of the most ridiculously absurd things, and that is a soapbox of mine. So, coming down from that soapbox, we have Deborah under the palm tree of Deborah judging the people. So we are between Ramah and Bethel. Now, Bethel, we discussed when we talked about Jacob. And there's that EL ending again. Bethel, Jacob, naming that place Bethel, and all that story we went over. But Ramah, let's do a trivia question. What other famous Bible character, we can even say prophet, was from Ramah? What other Bible character, and we could even say prophet, definitely was a prophet, was from Ramah. And and I said, not I'm a prophet, a judge. He was a judge. This was another judge. I'm sorry. He was a judge. What other judge, not only prophet, but what other famous Bible character? He was a prophet too. So I'm going to just say he was a prophet and a judge who was from Ramah. Who was that? So Deborah is here between Ramah and Bethel. And my question is, what other famous biblical prophet who was also a judge was from Ramah? Let's see if someone can get that. May have to you can do some Google searching on this. See if you can find it. See what we can do. Let's see. How can I make my finger go? If you're wondering what that is right above my fingernail in the door, Emily's got some corn stalks decorating the porch, and I shut the door and caught some of the corn stalk in the door. I see that. Okay. Let's see. Did Cookie get it? Yes, it is Samuel. Samuel was from Ramah too. And even there, Samuel died. I remember reading about his death at Ramah. So here we are with Deborah, she is in between Bethel and Ramah, and, and again, these are all places. I'm gonna say it like my uncle Kenneth said one time. He said he went to the Holy Land and he was standing, and I believe he named 7 different Bible stories he could see from where he was standing. And these Bible stories were like in different books of the Bible and several years apart. Uh, What we see over there, we see a land that so much history happened. It will be history on top of history. And uh, so you've got Bethel here where Samuel is from. I'm sorry, you have Ramah here where Samuel is from, and where you have where Deborah is right between Ramah and Bethel. You have Bethel with Jacob, and in fact, that was where Rachel died, was at Bethel. And you have all these things happening right in and around each other. And I think that's very interesting too, because he was telling he could see about 6 or 7 different Bible stories where the tour guide had pointed out to him, this is where this happened, this is where that happened, and you could see all of it from wherever he was standing. And so, the Holy Land is not, we live in such a large country in the United States that we think of things that happen in our history, and it may be something like the great San Francisco earthquake in the early 1900s, 1906, maybe somewhere in there, and then you read about that, and then you read about something happening in Washington D.C., and they are thousands of miles apart, and yet these things that we're reading in the Bible were not really that far from each other a lot of times. So uh, the Bible geography is very interesting. So here she is, and we see Deborah, and in this conversation that she has with Barak, she calls him to her, and she says, "I want you to look at the conversation that they have. Has not the Lord God of Israel commanded? Didn't God say go do this?" And it may be she was saying, "Oh, she is." She's saying, "Go do it." It's like she's getting on to him. Has not God commanded go and deploy troops at Mount Tabor and do all of this? Has He not done this? Okay, so in other words, why is she asking him that if she's not trying to spur him into action? Sometimes we need that spur into action. Has not God said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature"? Christians, is that not what we're supposed to do? Has not God said, "Let your light so shine before men"? It's something that God said to do. Has not God said, "Love thy neighbor"? uh, all these things that we could go on and on. What has not God said? Well, let's do it. And so here's his answer. If you will go with me, then I will go. If you will not go with me, I will not go. Now, I cannot totally blame Barak for wanting Deborah to go with him. After all, Deborah was righteous and good company. Uh, and even to the point, some commentators have said he really shouldn't be criticized for his reluctance here. As you see, Moses was at first unwilling to go to Egypt, and uh, Gideon was reluctant in how he was the least worthy to take what God told him to do. You have some of the other prophets saying the same thing, that why me? I'm not worthy to do that. And That's not a bad thing that he he tells them this. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, Amos was one that when the Lord came to him, I think it was Amos who, or maybe it was Jeremiah. I'm thinking about anyway. Uh, who I think it was Jeremiah who said he was such a youth. And I think that is. Let me go right in here and type this in because that, yeah, it was Jeremiah who said, "I am but a youth," and he was reluctant to go. He said, "But I am a youth," and the Lord told him, "Do not say I am a youth, for you shall go to whom all I send you." And so I don't criticize the reluctance that Barak had. And trying to put yourself in his shoes, Jabin was an incredible force of intimidation. And remember, Barak is listed in Hebrews 11. Now, before we get to criticizing Barak, because I've heard preachers just down him up one side and down the other, just condemn him, and oh, he should have been man enough to go without having a woman go with him, and all of these things. And he's not the only one that was reluctant. And I want to tell you something. The older I get, that we all have to remember, and I've said this before on this live stream, and I'm saying it again. You have to remember that the people you're reading about may be people you're going to meet one day and be with, and don't meet them having said something unnecessarily bad about them. Now, if the Bible says something bad about them, like a sin, like David should not have done what he did with Bathsheba, there's no doubt about that. God told us what he did. But when when we're told some things and some things are left silent, we need to be silent. One of the things that we do not do in the church today, like we should, is to be silent where the Bible's silent, simply because we insert an opinion there and we tell it as an opinion, but we defend it as if it were a fact. And I see preachers who've been preaching years more than I have do that. They will defend an opinion as if it were a fact. And we've forgotten that we're to let the Bible be silent where it is silent. We're just told here what he said. If you go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. Now, that tells us some things of how he felt. We do see the reluctance, we do see the fear. If you don't, I'm not going to. And really, we see a spark of rebellion in that. If you don't, I'm not going. And there again, Moses just outright said, "Just get somebody else, God." Yet he turned and went. And Barak said this, let's not be so harsh on him on this, because, and others even went with other people. For example, Moses went with his sister and with Aaron, leading the people out of the promised land. Now, Aaron went with him to Pharaoh, even. So he didn't go by himself either. God provided someone to go with him. And sometimes you'll see, here's the the battle, I believe it was the Amalekites. Aaron and Hur holding up the arms so that the battle would be won. Remember all of that? Things weren't done all the time by themselves. And in fact, to the extent, and this is a whole nother study, David killed Goliath, by himself. I mean, of course, him and God, but by himself. But Goliath had several other brothers that were giants too. And some of them may have been bigger than him, bigger than Goliath. And David used help, though, to kill them. If you look at Goliath's brothers, that David used some of his men and may have taken more than one to bring those boys down because I mean they were giants. They were true, giants. And David did Goliath by himself, but used help for the others. And I wish I could remember what blessed preacher pointed that out to me in a sermon one time. I made note of it in my Bible. But just because we want to do something with somebody does not make us any weaker. In fact, sometimes it is a symbol of strength, and it is a symbol of uh, a symbol of wisdom. Ecclesiastes 4 verse 12 says, "Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken." So there are times that it's good to have somebody with you. So anyway, he said it, and Deborah said, "Yes, I'll go with you. I will surely go with you." And she doesn't hesitate. Now, this to her credit. This to her credit. She says, "I will. Yeah, sure, I'll go with you." Look at that. Surely. Absolutely. Let's go. But nevertheless, you're not going to get any glory for this. The Lord's going to sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Now, Deborah, we said, was a prophetess, and this would have been revealed to her by God. And so she goes with him. And with him by her side, he does feel confidence. Barak does gain strength. He has courage with her. I do not, and we're not told what Lapidoth said about this, or maybe if Lapidoth went with him. But anyway, he wanted Deborah to go. She was a wise judge. She was a good choice to make. However, yeah, I'll go with you. Now, when this is over and God's going to deliver us, but you're not going to get the glory. Now, one of the big things about battle time in this day and age was the parade afterward. You never knew who was going to have the parade. It may be you, it may be your enemies with your head. You didn't know. But the battle parade or the glory afterward would not be given to Barak. And we see that in Deborah's song. But anyway, so then the scene changes again to what happens at the tent where I started a while ago. Heber the Kenite, he's a friend here with Jabin. They are near a terebinth tree at Zaanannim, and they hear that Sisera is coming up here with his 900 chariots of iron, and here we have these chariots rooted out. Some have said, he said, "Has not the Lord gone out before you?" That in this area, the bogs, swamps, mud would have weighed the chariots down to where that they could have been slow, and that would have caused them to be defenseless. Part of the let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Part of the power of a chariot was the fact that it could go fast, and you didn't just stand around and shoot at somebody. You shot while you were rolling quickly by. And in a muddy bog that some have said that this was here, that could have caused them to go slower, and that they even Sisera gets out of his chariot for some reason. Why does he get out of his chariot? And he alights from his chariot and he flees on foot. But everybody else in his army is killed. Verse 16, not a man was left. And then we see him in the tent scene. So he goes to the tent. Jael puts a peg through his head. And Deborah's song in chapter 5 she sings this song, and it's what we would call today a ballad, which, or the French ballade, the songs that tell a story. And this song here tells the story of the cap the captive uh, capturing of Sisera. I can't get the word out. The capturing of Sisera, and the highways are deserted. Just looking at the imagery here, and all of these things that that go on. I encourage you to read it. We're running out of time here, and the picture of the actual slaying of Sisera, so graphic. I appreciate this. Now, I had Sunday school teachers, and uh, I'm not going to start naming names, but because you know that there were so many good ones who never beat around the bush on this story. And we try sometimes to shelter our kids too much today, even in our Bible classes. And I remember listening with just excitement and how the Sunday school teachers would tell this story, and camp teachers who would tell this story and just tell it like it was. This is what happened. This is what she did. And all of this excitement leading up to him thinking he's safe, and a woman kills him with a tent peg piercing his head. What an ending that the song comes to in verses 28 following. And I want to read that. That's how I want to end our lesson today. I started here with after we read the story, I started here with the gruesome scene at the tent. Then we built up back to that gruesome scene at the tent. And now we're going to go to the aftermath of that gruesome scene at the tent and how picturesque it is. Verse 28 following of Judges chapter 5. The mother of Sisera looked through the window and cried out through the lattice, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarries the clatter of his chariots? Her wisest ladies answered her. Yes, she answered herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil? To every man a girl or two. For Sisera, plunder of dyed garments, plunder of garments embroidered and dyed. 2 pieces of dyed embroidery for the neck of the looter. Thus let all your enemies perish, O Lord. But let those who love him be like the sun, S-U-N, the sun, when it comes out in full strength. So the land had rest, and the song is over here. And it's like the narrator, who is believed to be Samuel, says, so the land had rest for 40 years. What an this ending is just fabulous. I cannot with enough words praise enough this ending of here's his mother. Of all people, you'll usually picture his wife, but it's his mother waiting for him to come, listening for Sisera's chariot, and it doesn't come. And her ladies in waiting say, oh, it's because they're taking so long dividing the spoil. They're just trumping those Israelites so bad that they're bringing home girls and they're bringing home garments, and these garments are going to be embroidered and dyed. And while he's going to get two pieces of this, and they're calming her, and then the scene changes to that's just let all your enemies perish like that, with their family thinking, oh, he's coming home, only to find out the hard truth. No, he's not, because he is not. He's dead. And they lost. You know how word didn't travel back then. We see this picture so many times in history throughout the world, someone waiting for a loved one to return from the war. Sometimes they would, sometimes they didn't. This time they didn't. If you fight against God, you're not going to every time return home. If you do, it'll be because God allows you to for some ultimate purpose, like He did allow them for 20 years to come home. His ultimate purpose to punish Israel, but this was it. This was the end. And here she is looking through the lattice of the window. They're quite wealthy. Lattice of the window of a house, something big back then. His chariot. Why is he waiting? And they say, oh, he's just dividing the spoil. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it ends with just let them all in thinking that. What a story. What Barak. And again, Barak is the one who is included in Hebrews 11. Why isn't Deborah? Well, don't say, well, it's because of they were just against women back then. Nonsense. Here's the Hall of Fame of the Faithful with Sarah and Rahab. We have women. We have women here. Why is Barak mentioned? And he he was not going to get the glory. He might not have gotten glory for that battle, but he gets glory for his faith. He does get the glory for that. And I like it in my copy I'm reading here. It's under a heading that says, by faith they overcame. And by faith, yeah, it was his faith that allowed him to overcome. So his faith led him to, who was it who asked Deborah? Well, he did. He wanted her, out of all the women, he wanted her to go with him, made a great choice there. And, you know, Barak's faith led him to get the people and go drive Jabin out. So there's our story tonight for this Wednesday. And I'm going to read this from Cookie. Deborah must have been powerful and revered, being the only woman judge and having a tree named after her. And not only that, it said people went to her. Not only was she powerful and revered, she was popular. People would go to her. I guess she was the Judge Judy of the time. I don't know. Uh, in fact, I think Judge Judy has Jewish blood in her, so she could be descended from Deborah. I don't know, but definitely was popular, and her wisdom was definitely way up there. So yeah, Deborah was powerful. She was revered. She had position, and it upsets me when people somebody said, well, only reason Deborah was the woman judge was because God couldn't find a man. Please find that in the Bible for me, where it says that God could not find a man, so he just put Deborah up there. It doesn't say that. But I've had people argue that the only reason there was a woman judge was because the Lord could not find a man. Let's be silent where the Bible is silent. We see other women who do great things too in the Bible. Look at Esther. Well, we just go on and on with other women in the Bible who did great things, and not just because there wasn't a man around. If God wanted to, He could have delivered Israel through Mordecai, Esther's cousin. Didn't have to have a marriage to do it if God wanted it that way. But He chose Esther over Mordecai. He chose Deborah over Barak, over Lapidoth, Deborah's husband, over everyone else, every other man. He chose Deborah because maybe it was because Deborah was the good and righteous person. And so let us be silent where the Bible is silent and stop spreading our opinions as if they are facts. So if it's an opinion, say it's an opinion and defend it just as well. This is why I have that opinion, but remember, an opinion can be wrong. And so, anyway, that's our story. That's our lesson. That's our scripture tonight. I didn't think it is odd at this time of Halloween, where we think of all things scary. We've got a story like this that is just as gory as any movie I've ever seen, and yet this really happened. And things like this did happen back in those days, more so than this. This isn't an only occurrence. So anyway, there we are. Thank you for tuning in and listening to us on our live stream. Thank you for joining us. And I want to say we will get with our Bible Bowl team. Look for we're not doing Google Meet, we're doing Screencast-O-Matic, which is just where we put it on Group Me and you listen to it at your own ease, at your own time, your own convenience is the word I'm looking for. Excuse me, at your own convenience. And hopefully, that will help you study as we study the Bible Bowl. We will meet at 11 o'clock at our building at Dovertown Church of Christ. We are in Cordova, Alabama, and in Walker County, Alabama. And of course, that will be at 11 o'clock that we will meet there. And then we will meet again at 2 o'clock on YouTube for another live stream. And so until then, may God bless you all richly and have a very good week. Remember everybody in our prayer list, on our prayer list, and we love you all. So having said that, we'll say good night. Good night, everybody.